Welcome back to the Mel K Show. I am very excited. Last week, I was lucky enough to go to a great event in California, and I spoke before my guest today, and I didn't know him that well, and we're sitting there, and as soon as he started speaking, I felt excited again. I felt like we weren't losing, like there was so much going on, and his perspective was so good. So he's been nice enough to come on the show. Many of you know him, but if you don't, Chad Prather, welcome to the show.
Mel, it is good to be with you. It was a pleasure to meet you, and I was so impressed with all the stuff that you were sharing at that meeting. I ran into somebody the other day who knew about that event. They said, "How did it go out in Escondido?" And I said, "It was great. It was an incredible group. Mel did an incredible job. I was just kind of along for the ride, but it was a fun evening." I realized a long time ago. I have been standing in front of audiences pretty much my entire life. I'm 51 years old now, so it's been a while. I was on television for the first time when I was 3 years old. So I've been in front of people for a long time. And I realized a long time ago that whatever you're trying to convey to people, whatever common sense or wisdom, knowledge, education, any information that you can try to transfer from one brain to another brain using language, it usually becomes an easier pill to swallow if you can wrap it in a little bit of humor. And so for me, I'm blessed and fortunate enough. I realized years ago that I have a reasonable gift for running my mouth. I'm better at running my mouth than most manual labor jobs that are out there. So I'm thankful that God gave me the opportunity to make a living talking, and it's a blessing to be able to do that. But I just always believed in the transference of ideas. Let's get together, come let us reason together, and let's look back at our founding fathers of this country. And they built this country on the ability to debate and discuss and dialogue and disagree. And at the end of the day, still come back together. And it was all about ideas. And these ideas were transformative. And so for me, I thought, what is the simplest way that we can convey these points that we believe in, these convictions and foundations that have not only made this nation great, but have made our lives what they are? How can we convey that? Because I don't know, I don't want to sound mean here, Mel, but we live in a day and age where critical thinking is lost. Common sense is lost.
Right.
But the ability to take complex and abstract thoughts and break them down in simplest terms has sort of been diminished. We live in a day and age where everything is transferred to us in little bites and bits through screens. And we're bombarded with headlines and news stories and just pablum 24/7. And our ability to tune that out and just think has been lost in a big way. So for me, years ago, I was doing a radio show and a television show, and I had a wild idea. I said, what if I sat in the cab of my truck and just for a minute and a half, 2 minutes in rapid fire succession, I put out witty, informative videos, sort of like people said, why did you start doing it in the truck? These days you see people always making videos in their truck or their car. I was one of the first. I was like a pioneer for that insanity. So for me, I said, I can control the lighting. I can control the sound. People will leave you alone because they think you're crazy talking to yourself in the cab of your vehicle. And so I started putting these things out, and I realized that people did not want, a long, extended talking head session, but how fast could we just get this out? And so it sort of became the shtick, if you will, to find a humorous way to convey ideas. It went crazy. It went crazy viral 10 years ago doing it. I've been able to consistently build off of it with live entertainment, music, comedy, podcasting. And so, I'm sort of like a goose. I wake up in a new world every day, and I see what's coming our way, and I try to figure out ways that we could take that wild information that's bombarding us and put it into bite-sized chunks and get it in people's brains. And I think it's been successful for me over the years. Some people love it, some people hate it, but it's an interesting world we live in to be able to do that. Yeah, I have to, you have to diversify your voice a little bit and put it in as many places as you can. And that in and of itself is a full-time job. I manage four different large pages on Facebook. I have a large Instagram, a reasonably large Twitter following. All of those spaces are sort of different in how you have to put information on there. They censor differently, they throttle differently, they algorithms work differently. So trying to stay abreast of that for a boy who grew up in the woods of Georgia and now is just trying to at my age survive the Texas heat where I live and have for the last 25 years. It's I'm not the most technologically savvy person, and so I try to figure out ways to convey, as you said, and thank you for saying that because that's a big part. I want to convey the genuineness, the realness. I'm not going to tell you something that I don't, first of all, believe myself. And over the years, Mel, I've kind of said I have my foot fits nicely into my mouth. So I've made a plenty of mistakes. I've said a lot of things over the years that I'm not even sure that I agree with. But at the moment I did. And I try to, what I try to do is be comfortable in my own skin. I know that I'm not for everyone. I know that there are going to be parts of me that are abrasive. We know that humor is subjective. Music is subjective as well. And so I've tried to say, okay, everything that I do, if I'm sitting in front of a large audience of people and we're doing a comedy show, I want at the end of the night you to have laughed and forgotten your world for a minute, but walk out thinking, that was a good point. He made a point, and I want to think about that. I have a song. I'm with a record label in Nashville called Based Records. We created a non-woke, uncancelable record label that people could put real music out there, say what we want to say. We've got a little money behind us. And the nice thing is we don't have to worry about the crazy record executive and labels out there that are really pushing people into radical woke ideologies and throttling back artists. And so I've got a song, for instance, coming out called Watered Down. And in that song, I wrote this song with multi-platinum songwriter Chris Wallen. And what we wanted to convey is that we're living in a world where people are sick and tired of all the things that have been done to us. And we've been through a whole lot in the last few years. You take the pandemic, you take the Biden presidency, you take the J6, you take the aspect of the legitimacy of the 2020 election, all these things that we're living in this crazy world. And so consequently, what has happened is a lot of people have just decided that it's not worth the fight anymore. And we've become very watered down. And, our art has become watered down. Our voice has become watered down. Our convictions. I mean, you think about what women, the rights that they fought to have, and now they're getting pummeled in sports by biological males. And all these things that are just radically violating the things that they fought to have a voice and to have in their life. It's been watered down. Our history has been watered down and revised. And so my good friend John Rich from Big and Rich, he lent his vocals and did some harmony on the chorus. And we're going to put that out just prior to the election. And it's those type of vehicles and vessels that you use to put out there that I think that's how you keep it real. I think that's how you break through, because I was writing sitcoms and pitching sitcoms years ago in Hollywood. And I was spent a lot of time out there. My management, my agency, my representation was all in Hollywood. And we had some very big producers and creators who were interested in my voice. And so I would write these things. We met with all of the studios. I mean, every one of them. The only studio that I never met with in that world for a couple of years was NBC. NBC was so woke and so radically left, they didn't want anything to do with me. So they always turned down every single meeting. And so we would go out there and I would talk to my manager at the time, Arthur. He's managed everybody in the music industry, people like Prince and Madonna, and then had numerous hit television shows for, a quarter of a century on TV. And I asked him, because he was a guy who got converted. He was an Obama voter, in 2008 who got converted, became a conservative in Hollywood. There are some out there, few and far between.
Right.
But I asked him, I said, is there any way to tear down this wall? Because I can remember sitting down with very big executives with these networks, and they knew exactly who I was. They knew what I stood for. And so I was up against it from the very beginning. And he said, there's no way to tear down this wall. There's no way. They've built it up so high and it's so thick and it's so massive that there's no way that conservatives can come back into the entertainment industry, at least the ones controlled by Hollywood and New York. There's no way that we can come back in and do that. But I've just kind of held on. I said, what if we could just chip away at it?
Yeah.
Let's just chip away at it, even if we have to get into other locations like I am in Texas, or if we do things in Nashville, and let's get these independent artists out there. I literally, right before I jumped on here with you, I just did an episode of my show with my friend Brian Kelly. Brian used to be one half of Florida Georgia Line. A lot of people who've ever listened to that country. And so Brian just came out with a solo. They split up, and a lot of it was over politics. Brian is conservative leaning guy. He's got a lot of great values. He put a song out that he wrote himself just a couple of weeks ago called Make America Great Again. And it's a really catchy, fun song that's kind of gone viral and done great. And he's doing this solo project. And you can only imagine a guy who was, filling up stadiums with Florida Georgia Line, and now is doing a solo project, and he chose to step out and say, I'm going to let my voice, which is a little more conservative, I'm going to let my voice be heard and use, my artistic creativity to put that voice out there. You can only imagine the persecution he's received because of it. I told him, I said, dude, the crazy thing about it is we're talking about a song here. This is a song that people are losing their minds over. This isn't a Supreme Court decision. This is a song, and people are losing their minds over this thing. So we had a great conversation, but that's, I think, what we have to do. Right. Little by little. I've found, Mel, and you probably have felt this way some in the world of podcasting and using your voice and platform, is sometimes you feel like, is anybody out there? I mean, is anybody listening? Sure. Is there any ears on out there? Can somebody come back to me and tell me that I'm not just speaking in vain? But what you're saying is not in vain. I know that what I'm saying is not in vain. There are people out there, and I have to every day remind myself that what we're doing has a purpose. Yeah. And that purpose, it doesn't come back void. It doesn't come back without bearing some fruit. And I'm thankful for that. So all I know to do is keep chipping away at that wall and punching and using our voice for the best that we possibly can. Yeah, I think there is. I was just thinking yesterday about that, and the word that popped into my head was revival. We tend to think of that in a religious context, of Christianity, and we do need a return in the regards to that, back to the foundational truths that redeem us, that were given to us by our Creator, and that sets us free from the bondage that we have been shackled by for so long. We do need that. But I think that, to your point, I think that the arts and creativity, I think those are the gifts of God. You read the Psalms in the Old Testament, those were songs that were written, inspired, by God and given back to God. And King David, who said, basically, there's songs I want to play, there's sounds I want to make, but I don't have instruments that will make them. So he built his own instruments. Back to the Levitical priesthood, that they built their instruments to play in the tabernacles. And then you go to 1 Peter 2:9, where the apostle says that you are a peculiar people, God's own chosen people, and you're created to proclaim the praises of him who brought you out of darkness and into his marvelous light. And I thought, I see us as being an instrument that God looked in the earth and said, I don't have that instrument. I want to make a sound. I want to make a noise. And I need a voice. And so God created Mel K, or he created Chad Prather, and we become that voice that God plays on, whether it is with humor or with, music or the spoken word or whatever that is. It's we need a revival of that understanding that this is a divine thing. There's no greater creator and designer and just creative force that can be expressed in the earth than what God does. And so to the degree that I think we become willing vessels in his hands, we'll see a revival of that's going to happen. I was just talking to my good friend, Matthew Marston, he came over from Britain. He goes to Hollywood. He was very well known and very successful as an actor in Britain, but you got to go to Hollywood. He comes to Hollywood. He's in Transformers. He's in Rambo. He's in Black Hawk Down. He does all these things. He ends up getting canceled out of Hollywood because of the vaccine, and he comes to Texas. He's making independent films, and his biggest frustration is he's like, listen, I've been at a high pinnacle in the world of Hollywood and acting and movie making. He said, but now there's no money. People don't want to invest in the arts. People don't want to invest in, let's make these films that say something. And no disrespect to the production houses that are out there making Christian-based or faith-based films. No disrespect to them. But I think there's bigger stories that don't have to take you into a Christian expression. They can just tell a values-driven artistic art form. And I think we're missing that. I mean, I really and truly believe that we're missing that. And there needs to be money. I mean, we could flower it up and call it, investment opportunities, but somebody's got to come along and say, you know what, I believe in this. It takes money to do these kind of things, because there are some really, really talented people out there. And I think we're going to see a revival of it. I think we have to. I think we have to. Well, we live in a fatherless society. We really do. Even the ones who are still connected in many ways, and you alluded to this, they're sort of shirking their responsibility. Or we're seeing fathers out there who they're more interested in being their child's friend than they are their child's parent. That's been problematic for us. I've lived on the road. I've had to be at great distances from my kids, but I've never not been involved in my kids' lives, even if there was physical separation between us. I have a great relationship with all of my children to this day, even as adults, maybe even closer today than ever before. And I wanted to be a father. I wanted to be a father. I wanted to be a father as soon as I could in life. I wanted those kids. And, after we had one, we were like, let's have another one. And after we had two, we were like, you know what? I think we could have 100 of these things. And then you got a litter of kids and you're like, well, what are we going to do with them? Because these things, they bleed and they sneeze and they snot and they poop and they do all these things. And they talk back, and being a parent is hard, and thank God for good mothers and good fathers, people that understand their role. But men particularly have been villainized in a big way. I often joke. I've said it over the years. I said I'm public enemy number one. I'm a white heterosexual Christian conservative male. And I wear a cowboy hat and I have a dog in the back seat. People love to hate me these days. I check all the wrong boxes.
You're weird.
I am weird. That is a word that I have worn that's a badge of honor for a long, long time for me. I take it to a credit.
Right.
But they called masculinity toxic, and real masculinity is not toxic. And if it's toxic, it's not masculinity. But they did that. There was a softening of the male. Well, every part of it, the male persona, the male physique, there was men weren't supposed to be men. They're not supposed to, when I get around men, I want to know they're men that are capable. Men, when I say that, they're capable of a lot of things. They're capable of violence. They're capable of strength. I had two big trees that fell down 2 weeks ago when Hurricane Beryl came through here. And when those two trees came down, I wanted some strong men who could handle a chainsaw and who could take care of business to come over here and help me get rid of those trees. And so you need that in society. Jordan Peterson has alluded to men of violence, men who are at least capable of violence. I refer to Jesus, who said, the kingdom of God suffers violence and the violent take it by force. What I've consistently told my audience in recent days is, we're living in violent times. We're living in days where significant, real, tangible, kinetic violence could take place at any time in our country. We're very vulnerable at this stage in the game. We're seeing on the world stage how our leadership in Washington, D.C. has made us very vulnerable because they don't have a backbone. And ultimately, it boils down to this idea that we're supposed to embrace this tolerance and kindness and generosity and gentleness to the point of watering down everything that's out there. We've watered down masculinity. We've watered down femininity. We've watered down parenthood. Single parent homes has now been incentivized in our country. We see that in the Black community when 70% of those homes are without a father. We see the epidemic problems that come out of the lack of a male role model and parent. And so, I make a joke. I do a song called "Beat That Ass." We do that song. And I want to get people's attention. I saw the funniest T-shirt the other day that it had a wooden spoon on the shirt. That says, "I'm a wooden spoon survivor." and these days that idea of corporal punishment, it's abusive. And I often joke. I say, Chad Prather came to town. He was advocating for child abuse, and I'm like, it's not child abuse, but I'll tell you what. My father was a strict disciplinarian. I never thought about being another gender. I never thought about being, something that I'm not. I grew up with a very strong sense of self-confidence and identity. And with that identity came a sense of destiny. And with that sense of destiny came an understanding of my history and where I came from. And all of that's going to lead to a great legacy that I can leave behind to my children. The Bible says a righteous man leaves an inheritance to his children's children. That's not just money. That's a name and a reputation and a legacy. You want to leave those things. So, I'm proud of my kids. They're very much involved in the arts. I've got 2 daughters that have been published. I've got a daughter that's a professional dancer who tours all over the country in Canada. I've got a son who is a mathematician, who is a prodigy, and I'm proud of these kids. And I wish I could take credit. Their mom and God bless them in spite of us, I think. But I'm so proud of these kids. And, we don't agree on everything. We talk about a lot of different things. We come from some different perspectives. And here's the thing. Here's a crucial thing, and I'll hush. But one of the things that I've told people over the years, because people say, your kids, they did so well and they do so well. What's the secret? And I said, there is no secret, but I could tell you where we came from. I said, we talk about teaching kids right from wrong. You got to be careful with that, I think. And I don't want semantics to get in the way. But what's right for me may not be right for them. What's wrong for me may not be wrong for them. But let's teach them a value system. And if they have the right values, then they know that they know how to make the decision between right and wrong. So they know that sex before marriage can lead to a whole lot of consequences that they don't want to have in their life. And if they do value life and they become pregnant, their first thought isn't, hey, let's do what 95% of the people who get abortions do and use this as birth control. So again, I said, let's teach a value system, and then let's let the choices of right and wrong come out of that. And I think listen, they struggle just like everybody else does, especially at a young age as they're approaching, adulthood and getting into adulthood. It's a weird time. It's a weird transition, particularly for boys. I experienced it where you move from being a boy to being a man, and it's a weird transitional period because people still kind of look at you both ways.
Right.
And it's true for women as well, of course, but I can't speak to that. I'm a guy, but I've watched my kids kind of transition through those things, and I think they've done a good job of that. And I believe truly because they've got a value system.
Yeah.
And we've lost that idea of values. We don't, we just don't do that anymore. Well, the apathy, I won't say laziness, I won't say that, but the apathy that has been birthed out of cynicism is tangible. So yes. I've always said that, a cynic is a passionate person who's tired of being disappointed. And, you see what's going on in your country and you go, man, everything that we have believed in and built our lives on and thought made us exceptional is being eradicated and erased. And we don't know what to do because this thing is so much bigger than we are. What I remind people, Mel, is I say, 2016, they set the algorithm in such a way, they thought that Hillary was going to win, and they thought she was a shoo-in. If you believed the polls, then Hillary was going to be the president. Well, she wasn't, and they realized they didn't turn the knob up high enough. Well, they turned it up to 11. I mean, this is Spinal Tap. They turned it up to 11 with Joe, and a guy who didn't campaign, who was mentally unaware, who spent his time licking windows in a basement, got 81 million votes, got more black votes than Barack Obama did in two different election cycles. And we were like, this is sketchy, right? And I'm trying to choose my words right here because I know how we get throttled when we say certain things. But we were like, we've got some questions here. So, now Joe's out, Kamala's in, and we're like, what are they going to do? Turn the algorithm up so she gets 110 million? We're already seeing the psychological operation they're doing against us right now. She went from being the lowest polling approval rating in modern history for a vice president at one point, 26%. To within a matter of days, she became this Democrat darling that they held her up as a messiah and a savior and this shining example of what a candidate should be. A person who has never received a single vote or a single delegate becomes the presumptive nominee on the basis of whatever, the DNC just putting their finger on her and saying, you're going to be the one. And we sit back and we're sort of demoralized. And I'm like, listen, guys, they can only turn the knob up so high. And I've done the studies, and I talked with numerous people, like, for instance, Attorney General Andrew Bailey in Missouri, who was on the show recently. We were talking about the amount of people who share our values. They may be gun owners, they may be hunters, they may be fishermen. These people who tend to share our values, who simply don't go vote. They have not been going to vote. So I'm encouraging people, we keep telling people, go get people and take them with you to vote. Let's get everybody out there. And you're like, well, they're still going to try to rig the thing. Maybe so, but man, we sure can do more to expose it. Because let's face it, you notice that Kamala Harris, and I'm not sure when this episode will come out, but at this point in time, Kamala, who's been to a couple of concerts that they call rallies, she is yet to come out in 2 weeks' time and do a press conference because they know she's not an intelligent person. She cannot. Let me qualify that. I think she is an intelligent Marxist, but I think that there is a dichotomy going on in her brain, and she has to be very careful with what she says because the Marxist tropes want to come out, and she's fighting that. And so it's like the little devils are in her head playing ping pong, and she can't talk. So it turns into a 500, 700 word count word salad. And so it's not that she doesn't, she has a belief system and a conviction, but they do want to keep her away from the microphone where she speaks off script because those things are going to tend to come out. Yeah. When people see those things, when they see, a mass turnout in November for the election, when you expose enough stuff, June 27th at the debate, that was a perfect example where suddenly people's eyes were open to just how bad off a guy with dementia who's sitting in the Oval Office, how bad off he really was. So what we got to do is overwhelm the algorithm, truly expose what's going on, and get these people who are so apathetic and cynical and tired of being disappointed, get them re-involved and say, you know what, let's just overwhelm them with numbers, and let's see if we can revive these institutions that have made America great for so long. It's just a transference of ideas and sharing. And the website is the most vain website name ever, watchchad.com. I have people say, what are we going to watch you do? Watchchad.com, or you can go to chadprather.com. They all go to the same place, and my schedule is right there on the front. You can keep up with me. And of course, people can always catch me on the Chad Prather Show, which is, Rumble and all the places, and YouTube and all the podcast platforms. But man, it's a blessing when people come out and hang out. I promise you, I'm very approachable everywhere I go, and because I love those folks, and we have fun. We have a lot of fun. And so I do encourage people, if you get an opportunity, come hang out with us and have some fun. Yeah,
we got to get back to fellowship. We got to get back to exchanging ideas. You were talking earlier about the founders, all those years of the Federalist Papers, they didn't agree. They were fighting and this and that. They all agreed on freedom. And that is what we're fighting for. And Chad Prather, you fight for it every day. And go to his website now. If you don't follow him everywhere, just go follow him. But definitely try to show up and bring your friends that you think may or may not vote. And I guarantee you after a show, they'll be all in. So thank you so much, sir. I really, really appreciate you being here. And thank you for all you do for this country. And I look forward to seeing you again.